Thank you very much. So I will try to explain why a landlocked country, and you all know that Switzerland sits in the middle of Europe and is in fact landlocked. Why should Switzerland bother to have an ocean fleet and to have a Swiss registry? Switzerland does have it, but there are not so many ships registered in Switzerland. So in order to attract new tonnage, there were some motions to adjust the regulation concerning the registration of ships. Some amendments have been adopted, some remained for a future schedule, and then we shall see what was the outcome of the whole exercise. So as you know, Switzerland is, so you can imagine Europe and Switzerland being in the middle of it, so totally landlocked, but you see the town of Basel on the north of the country. Via the River Rhine, Switzerland still has a connection to the ocean. So Basel is the port of registry for Swiss seagoing ships. And it is not always written Basel. You know that Switzerland has 3 or maybe 4, but let's say 3 languages, German, Italian, and French. So depending on where the shipping company is situated, is the name of the ship, the name of the port of registry on the ship is either Basel or Baal or Basilea. Okay. Switzerland is present in global shipping. Long time ago, there were Swiss merchants working in different European ports, and they had their commodities, but they also had their ships, but these ships didn't have a Swiss flag. So long time ago, in the 19th century, there was a motion coming from Swiss merchants to Swiss authorities, do give us a Swiss flag for our ships. And the authorities, they said, okay, that's a fair proposal. We are willing to give you the right to fly the Swiss flags. But that motion was unsuccessful because some other maritime powers, and I guess these were the countries whose flag those ships were flying at that moment, they said, no, we want to keep those ships. So that was just a proposal that was not successful. Switzerland had problems with national supplies during the First World War, and that showed again during the Second World War. It was not so critical in the time in between, but there was this understanding we do need our own flag, our own registry. So during the Second World War, there were some ships under Swiss flag, and the Swiss flag was organized in the way that the Hague Rules were adopted as national law, and a new law in 1 month period was adopted in Switzerland, so that there is at least a basic legislation on the ocean shipping. And on this slide, there is the ship Calanda, that was the first of 14 ships that operated under the Swiss flag during the World War II. But in order to have a proper fleet, there had to be a decent legislation. So after the war, the endeavors continued, and maritime navigation, the Federal Act on Maritime Navigation, was adopted in 1953 and entered into force in 1957. So Switzerland got tonnage ships. Switzerland had a proper legislation, and in the best times, in the 1980s, there were 37 ships flying Swiss flag. Since then, the number steadily declined. I consulted some legal sources, and I found two different figures now. There are either 11 or 12 separate ships with a Swiss flag. But I have to stress, that the flag of the ship is one thing, and the ownership or the operation of a ship, that is a totally different issue. So when it comes to ownership of the merchant fleet, there are plenty of Swiss ships. There are many merchants situated in Switzerland who control 900 vessels are currently operated by Swiss-based companies. So 900 compared to 11 or 12, that is a big difference. When I was preparing this presentation, that was 10 days ago, I just read in the different newspapers that when container fleet is concerned, Switzerland is the world's largest container ship operator. That was a big surprise even to me. Why are there so few ships under the Swiss flag? Those ships certainly have a genuine link. There is a genuine link between the Swiss owner and the Swiss registry. There's not more than 11 or 12 because the requirements that are listed in the Federal Act on Maritime Navigation and in the Ordinance on Maritime Navigation, they're pretty strict. They require that ownership, financial means, and many other elements have to be complied with so that a ship can fly the Swiss flag. The registered office of a company, the actual center of the business of the company has to be located in Switzerland. The conditions concerning nationality, financial resources, there is a whole list of everything. All these elements have to be fulfilled. Especially hard requirements were put in the ordinance only in 1997, so that the requirements were even stronger instead of being eased for the ships. 3/4 of the partners or shareholders who hold 3/4 of the capital of the company must be Swiss. Cooperative members or management or share capital and administration and management, everything was full of Swissness. The ship owner was required to provide a financial report to Swiss authorities. There was, if one vessel was to be financed entirely with foreign funds, that was allowed as long as it didn't impair the Swissness of the whole company, and so on. So that is the regulation that concerns ship owners, but shipping companies that are not owners, that are just operators, they were requested to meet the same requirements. So at the beginning of this century, you know how the development in the world shipping is, so it is quite understandable that there were not many companies who wanted to fulfill all these requirements. This is a photo that I like very much. You can see the Swiss flag on that ship. The name of the ship is Bernina, and the port of registry is Basilea, not Basel, Basilea. Okay. So in 2023, the Swiss federal government decided to change the requirements, to ease the requirements, to relax them, and to create an attractive, competitive, service-oriented quality flag, not a cheap flag or whatever, but a quality flag and a reliable regulatory framework, and to attract those ships. That was the main idea. All those ships that were owned or operated by Swiss companies, to attract them to register in the Swiss registry. So the motion, so to ease the registration requirements, but not to go so far to turn the register into a flag of convenience. So an ambitious maritime strategy was adopted, where it says that the Maritime Navigation Act is outdated, didn't keep pace with the developments, and so on and so on. So the legal foundations had to be updated, but always within the frame of national law and international rules. This is another photo of a ship from belonging to a Swiss shipping company. Unfortunately, this ship is not registered in Swiss registry, but it belongs to Swiss Atlantic, and this is one of the two shipping companies. The other one is Reederei Zürich. These are the only two shipping companies who have ships registered under the Swiss flag. So the task of easing and revising the legislation was given to the Swiss Maritime Navigation Office in Basel, and they were given the task to rearrange the registration, make the registration, the administrative process of registration, to make it less stringent, but to maintain safety and other necessary standards. So I visited the web page of the Swiss Navigation Bureau, where it says what are the advantages for a ship if it is registered in the Swiss registry. A reliable legal framework, yes, Switzerland does have it. Stable economic situation, yes. Effective and accessible administration, and this office is meant, yeah. They are accessible, they are friendly, they know their job, that is fine. Switzerland continues to apply all international conventions, yes. It cooperates with 6 well-known classification societies. The seafarers are allowed without any problems to have their trade unions. So these are, in fact, arguments in favor of a Swiss registry, and I liked so much the last one. When you are on board of a ship sailing under Swiss flag, you have a feeling of being at home. Who can have that feeling? Maybe the master is Swiss and 1 or 2 officers, but the Filipino crew on a Swiss ship, whether they are going to have a feeling at home, but that is just the last one. But these previous advantages that are here listed, they're all okay. So what has been done since that maritime strategy has been adopted? The Federal Act on Maritime Navigation has not been changed. There were discussions, but nothing happened. What was changed, relaxed or so, are the requirements in the ordinance. So all those strict requirements that I mentioned that were adopted in 1997, they were mostly deleted. The requirements for a shipping company are set back, I may say, to be equal to all other companies' requirements from the Code of Obligations. No special, even more strict requirements if a company is a shipping company. So the shipping companies can be majority financed by external sources. Before, Swiss ships had to have the highest class. Now that is reduced to have a normal commercial class for their vessels. The conventions continue to apply. So these were very, very moderate changes, and they came into effect on the 1st of January of this year. What has not been adopted here is maybe more important. The requirements that management based in Switzerland has to be at minimum, they have to have their own funds, at least 20% of the company. That remains totally unchanged. This maritime strategy of 2023, there was a midterm review at the beginning of this year, where they acknowledged that many of those nice wishes, it was not possible to adopt them in a relatively short period of time. This was particularly so for simplifying procedures related to company assets and increasing the control by auditing bodies. These were those yearly reports, financial reports that each company has to submit to the regulatory auditing bodies. They still have to do it. What was even more important in the 70s or 80s, the Swiss government was granting guarantees to Swiss ships, to companies. So there were companies who had financial difficulties, who even went bankrupt and so on. So they were asking for those guarantees to be financially helped, and the Swiss government was obliged under these guarantees to help them, and that costed a lot of money, so that the contracts for those guarantees were just stopped. No new contracts were concluded. So that was an incentive to companies that was suddenly missing. Another thing was that the tonnage tax system, that is a kind of flat rate tax that is adopted in many European countries for shipping companies in order to help them financially. In these changes of legislation, that has not been adopted. So Swiss shipping companies were still forced to pay normal taxes like any others. There was not another possible financial incentive has not been adopted. So as I said, these are nice proclamations about financial stability, about high or standards, about feeling of Swissness and so on. But obviously, that was not enough for Swiss shipping companies to move their ships to Swiss registry. They just realized that having their ships registered elsewhere was made financially even more sense. I said previously that there are two shipping companies having those 11 or 12 ships registered in the Swiss registry. And I have heard on a meeting recently that they also envisage to change the flag of those ships and to go to Singapore. But that they are still in the process of the negotiations on the motions on the registry and so on, and that they are willing to come back. So I want to understand that as a maneuver to put pressure on the government to tell them, go on, ease the requirements, change the legislation, finish the job that you have started, and then we shall come back and maybe bring even more ships, but not under these solutions that remained halfway. That was simply not enough. So the efforts continue, and I really do hope that they will bring the legislation to the final goal so that it will really make the registry attractive to those 900 ships operated by the Swiss companies, so that the registry, the Swiss flag, the Swiss legislation, Swiss influence in the IMO or whatever, that it will be bigger and stronger than until now. Thank you very much.